What I did was, see, if I was doing it today, I would do it differently. What I did back then, in the penalty of perjury statement, I just had a black marker and I just blacked out like 3/4 of it.
Oh, man.
And they freaked out. They said I was defacing it. And I said, yeah, but if I sign this, I'd be committing perjury. I'm not a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
I'm not a U.S. citizen. And they gave it to me.
Huh.
So, and people came up to me afterwards and they're like, how did you do that?
Yeah, where did you bring it?
I was in the federal building in downtown L.A. on Wilshire.
Okay. Yeah, because looking at the places you can bring it, it says, these courts and district courts and the probate court, and clerks.
Oh,
and,
you mean to qualify as an ID? Is that what you meant?
No, to bring the application.
Oh. I didn't know that.
I mean, most people around here, middle of nowhere, we, bring it to the post office.
Yeah, post office, exactly.
But I doubt they would take it, lined out. Daniel brought up an interesting thing on the acts or conditions. It says on there, what doesn't, or what does apply to you to line out, and it had all these kind of, citizenship with foreign states and sexual trade violations, I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff on there.
Right.
It says line out, what you've done, so I'm thinking, well, you can line out anything on that document that, that you don't, I guess, that I don't think applies to me or I'm not aware of anyways.
Well, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, Jay, I believe that the assumed name certificate are actually not only our founding business documents, they are the papers that allow us to travel for free. So, and I don't mean free as in they give you a free ticket, but to avoid
freely
security, travel freely. So you avoid security. They don't even take you through security. But
wow.
So the reason I say that is because there has to be a way for people that are not U.S. citizens to be able to come and go without getting some kind of government document that has a picture on it.
There's got to be a remedy somewhere.
So there's a way to authenticate the assumed name certificate. You get John Kerry's office. First you get a certificate of office from the Minnesota Secretary of State's office, from their administration, that says that the current elected Secretary of State meets all the requirements. That's a certificate in and of itself, which means that assumed name certificate is valid. And then you send that to the Secretary of State, John Kerry. And then you get back, and it's kind of a bonded. I'm getting some kind of feedback from, I think that's you, Rick.
Okay.
Let me try it.
It's like mute your microphone.
I will. How about that?
There you go. That's better. Much better.
Okay.
So the if you look at this guy Lance, that's in, I think he's New York or New Jersey, one of the two. And he had his authenticated, and it's like in a bound thing. He's got the assumed name certificate in there. He's got the certificate of office from the Secretary of State, and then John Kerry's thing on top, which says it has the full faith and credit of the United States. So it's, in essence, you can use that in any other country. And if you look at the second page of the assumed name certificate paperwork, it has a seal at the top and the signature of the Secretary of State along with your business entity ID. And underneath it is this long, it's like 7/8 of the page is blank. And so it's like that's where they could stamp. That's where it could act as your traveling papers. Because what is it doing? It's identifying your business entity And your business entity is what's operating in commerce, not you.
Right.
You're just traveling. But when you buy the ticket, that's commerce. So the ticket, the manifest, is going to be in the name of your business entity, so it'll match your papers. That's my business entity. Here, stamp. And if you need a visa, that would be what you give to the foreign embassy here to get a visa. I haven't tried it yet, but if it's authenticated by John Kerry, I think that pretty much seals the fact that it's for real. And like we know, anytime you operate in commerce, you've got to use that name to legally operate. You have to. That's what the law requires. So that's
right. Yeah. And then there's, I see two issues that were these.
I think we lost Jay.
Yeah, I think so. Question: Can you explain a little bit why you think sole proprietorship is not taxable?
The IRS is the one that tells us that.
I looked at that site. I couldn't find anywhere where it said that, Doug.
If you Google, well, the bank knows it too. The bank confirmed. I said it's a sole proprietorship, which is a tax category, but you understand sole proprietorships have no tax.
The IRS calls them a pass-through.
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean? The money passes through that account. Okay,
Yeah,
but it's not a taxable entity.
Yeah, but usually they want you to go ahead and file a 1040 using a Schedule C, and that's where.
So what is that? So what is that? Is that business income?
1040 is for personal income.
There you go. You don't have any personal income.
That's right, you don't.
So
okay, that explains it.
Yeah. So the sole proprietor and the sole proprietorship are one and the same. That's their definition of a sole proprietorship. It's where the legal name and the legal business entity name are the same.
Got it.
Well, that's your legal name is the name you registered to create the business entity, so that the business entity is the sole proprietorship, the legal name is the sole proprietor. There they are. Neither one of them are you.
That's true.
Yeah, I dropped off. I just got back on.
Yeah. So we were just talking the sole proprietorship by the government's definition is a tax-exempt entity. It's just, as Rich called it, it's a pass-through. So the funds pass through that account, and then they're spent. And you're the one who has control of those funds, but none of that revenue that's being generated and dropped in there is personal. It's all business. You don't own any of it. You just control it. Remember, it's being held in that name, that business entity name. So anything, any property that you currently have that's in that name is business property. It always has been. It's just that until you register that name, you couldn't prove it. Now you can. So, and it's connected to that Social Security number because the Social Security number is necessary for that entity to operate in commerce legally. So when you register that name, now that Social Security number is your friend. It's not the mark of the beast unless you're considering your business entity the beast to be the one with the mark. They call it a mark sometimes too. They'll call that legal name a mark. And
it's one thing that I'm trying to get my head wrapped around is the legal entity and the name and how many are there. You know, when I was born, you know, there's some sort of document filled out where my family name and, you know, name my parents gave me was put on a document, and then some entity was created, you know, given that name, Is that, you know, how does that relate to
Well,
the name that I put on the A and C? Is that the same entity? Does that overcome that entity?
Well, let me answer your question. The birth date is the birth of that legal name. But the date you were born on is different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It could be the same. It could be the same there, but they mean two different things. It was the birth date of the entity that is a part of the birth record, and when you get a copy of that birth record, what do they call it? A certificate of live birth. So that certificate of live birth may or may not have a heartbeat. It may or may not have an umbilical cord. They explain that's what live birth is. It's the expulsion of a product that may or may not have a heartbeat and may or may not have an umbilical cord. Well, there it is. It's that piece of paper. It's a product. The expulsion of a product. So what expelled it? The printing machine when they click the button print, and then they hand it to you for 30 bucks or whatever. And then what they should be doing at that point is telling you, hey, if you're going to use this in commerce, this is your legal name, you need to register it. Here's how you do it. It's called an assumed name certificate. And you fill this out, and you get an entity ID number, and now these are your founding business documents. You can go down to the bank, open a business bank account. Now all those funds flow. Well, if they do that, nobody's going to pay any taxes. So in other words, if they tell you the truth, none of this will work. It only works when you're under the impression that that's you. And then when you try to say, no, that's not me, they will force that on you. So how do you prove it? Assumed name certificate. That's the only reason for that document. It's to prove that's not you. It doesn't matter who you are. It matters that that legal name is registered, and that's what you're using in commerce. You're just a representative. You're the name holder. You're the one who controls anything that's held in that name. So, like, it operates just like a trust. It holds all the assets. And then you're just like the trustee or the general executor. You have complete control over those assets. Nobody else does. And that's not something that someone gives to you. You create it. You're the author of that document. And the Secretary of State certifies it, which means it's true. So it's just simply a matter of understanding that this is the way we were supposed to use it. And it's counterintuitive because I'll also tell you, when you register your car, you're giving it to the state. That's a gratuitous action. You're paying to give it to them and then paying again to allow them to use it. Registration is a use tax. It's a trick. They're tricking you into doing that, and when they do that, because you gave it to them, they can turn around and rent it back to you, and then if you don't do what they tell you to do, they can take it back. Look at that Social Security Administration, the rules regarding that number. If they want to, they can require that you give it back. So if they do that, you have to give it back. But they have to allow
cards back.
Yeah, but they have to allow you to operate in commerce, which is the whole reason that assumed name certificate exists. It's for us.
I think an interesting point. There's everybody talk about the application for Social Security card. If you look, that's the name of it. It's an application for Social Security card.
Right.
So nobody ever actually applies for a number. Everybody applies for the card.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that card, you don't own that number, and that you don't even own that card.
Right. Yeah.
So, but the card is undoubtedly connected to that legal name in their database.
So that's precisely why you can use that assumed name certificate to open a bank account, a business bank account. What do? They put in that number, and what pops up? That legal name. Wow, look at that. If you do that in the DMV, they freak out. Because they're looking at that and saying, wait, that can't be your business name, that's you. No, that's my business name. So that driver's license is not a license. It's a business card. There's a friend of mine, this woman that I just met her online. She found the paper I wrote and emailed me. She lives in Santa Monica. We registered her, it was like on a Friday, a couple weeks ago. The following day, she was out in her car, and she has her car registered, but she rolled through a stop sign in a quiet neighborhood. No one was around. At least she didn't think anyone was around, but there was a cop, and he was hiding. He saw her, pulls her over. She has her assumed name certificate paperwork on the seat. She's planning on going to a FedEx store and getting it laminated, and she just hadn't gotten around to that yet, but she had it right there. And he comes up, and he's all smiling at her and everything. He says, you just rolled right through that stop sign, didn't you? You didn't even attempt to stop. And I don't know what her response was, but he says, okay, I need your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. And she says, oh, you mean you need my business card? Not my driver's license, you need my business card. Yeah, hang on one second. He's like, no, I want your driver's license. She goes, no, it's my business card, hang on, I got paperwork. So she gets it all together and hands it to him, and he's like handing her back the assumed name certificate. She goes, no, you need to read that. I'm registered. Are you registered? She just asked him that question, which is what I told her. I said, they have to be registered too. That's what the law says. So when you show them, hey, this is my ID. This identifies my business entity. That's my business card. That doesn't identify me. And ID is identification for a thing. So you can only identify an entity, ID entity. You can only identify a thing. So that card identifies your business entity, and your picture just happens to be on it. But that's your registered business entity. It matches the name on the assumed name certificate. That name you think is the first, middle, last name? No, that's your business entity name. It's registered now. So that cop takes the other paperwork. He handed back the assumed name thing. He did not want to keep that. Walked back to his car, wasn't back there more than 30 seconds, came back, did not approach her window though. He stood behind the driver's side window, like at the passenger door, with almost his back to her, handed her, without looking at her, the paperwork and said, here, stop at a stop sign next time. Have a nice day. And walked away. And I said, you know why he did not want to face you. It wasn't just his ego, although that had something to do with it, I'm sure. It was because he didn't want you to see his name tag or his badge number, because he's already in trouble. If you're registered, he's not supposed to pull you over. You tricked him. You had a numbered plate on your vehicle. It explains why they won't even pull me over, because I got private property on my plate. It's not a numbered plate. But even with a numbered plate, if you've registered, they cannot stop you without taking a risk. He could claim, well, I didn't know that she was registered. And he might have a point, because it's kind of a trick. If you're registered, why do you have that numbered plate on your car? Why are you paying when you don't have to? Why don't you just say private property? Because that's what it is. When you put a plate on there, it's public. That's considered to be public property. But when you're registered, like I said, there's no contract anymore with government, because they didn't tell us from the beginning what we were doing. They misled us. And even the government employees don't know that they're misleading other people. If they did, they might not do it. So there's people at the top that know, but the vast majority of these government employees are just doing what they're told. They're in these little cubicles. Their work is just to do one thing so that they can't possibly connect the dots like we can't. You have to step back and then realize, wow, this changes everything. So registering that name is required by the law. That's the voluntary nature of the whole system. It's connected to registering that name. When you register that name, you're no longer forced to be a volunteer. Why? Because you're complying now. So when you operate in commerce, you could not use that name at all, ever, and they'd never be able to do anything to you. But how do you work? How do you do anything? You have to be able to have a legal name and a tax ID number to be able to operate in commerce legally. So we're just unknowingly doing this by going out and working and calling ourselves this person that's really just a business entity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me.
It sure does, yes.
Yeah, it really is common sense. It can't be complicated. It's got to be something that the average person.
When we use that registered name, just the birth certificate name, not the ANC registered name, then we are treated as that entity that's created by the state. So that's one, and that's obviously why
we're treated as a citizen, number one, because the presupposition is that person is a U.S. citizen. Okay, so that's one thing that happens, and then the other thing that happens is you're already a criminal. Why? Because you didn't register that name. That's a crime.
So then when we do register a name, then that overcomes at least the presumption that we are that entity.
Exactly.
And therefore, now I become a man using that entity, and in my situation, out of necessity, in commerce.
Right. And it's the proper word, I believe, rather than presuming or presumption, is presupposition. They presuppose you're a U.S. citizen, and that always kind of throws them into a tailspin when you tell them, look, this proves I'm not a U.S. citizen. Because, see, that's part of that personal jurisdiction thing. You must be a U.S. citizen. Nope, I'm not. I can't prove that I am. But can you prove you're not? Now you can. That assumed name certificate is the proof.
Well, and U.S. is a creation of Congress situated in the District of Columbia.
Well, what it does, see, you're talking about Congress is statute law. That's legislation. None of that applies to living people. It applies to your business entity, but that's fine. If they want to arrest your business entity, let them do it. That's the whole point here. They need it to be you, because they can't convict a business entity unless it has a license. But see, again, this is not a license, so there's no strings attached. You have the same power of a corporation that's in good standing with no strings attached at all. The only strings are the ones you're pulling, because you own that puppet. The puppet is what's operating in commerce, not you. Why? Because it has to be something artificial. That's why any of these names that they try to use, natural person, American national, no, none of the above. If you want to identify my business entity as one of those things, go right ahead. But see, the passport is kind of it's a strange thing. The passport office will admit it's not an ID, but at the same time, they'll accept it as if it is one. Why? Because it's an illusion to begin with. That really is your name. It's a surname and a given name. But when you fill out that form, it's first, middle, last name. So they're doing the exact opposite of what they do, you know, in terms of taking your real name and converting it to that first, middle, last name, which is their creation. I don't have a last name. So what are they doing? They're taking that first, middle, last name and turning it around and saying it's a surname and given name. That really is you. So and then where it says nationality on the USA passport, it says United States of America. And in Canada, the ones they're doing today, it just says Canada. Well, how is that a nationality? It's not. A nationality would be a citizen. It would relate to a citizen. A U.S. citizen or a Canadian citizen, whatever. But that does not imply or in any way convey that you are a citizen of any kind. That's why they have to ask you. But it sure looks like it does. It's an illusion. It's all an illusion. They make it all fancy and everything. That's why I say I don't believe we need one of those, because there's no reason to have a picture on our business papers. Picture of what? Why would my picture be on something that my business is related to, unless I was a real estate agent and wanted to flash my face around? So it just is common sense that that's what this document is. It's a travel document. It takes the place of the passport, and guess where you get that authentication? The Department of State, the same place you get the USA passport. Wow. So the authenticating a document that is certified from this country should allow us to use it in any other country, as long as we have permission to go there. So your business asks for permission using that assumed name certificate. Hey, I want to travel on these dates. Here's my papers. Okay, here's the $100 or whatever it costs for the visa. It's all about commerce, but it's your business entity that's in commerce, not you. Your business entity is the one that's getting that visa. And then when you arrive in that country, they stamp the back of the authenticated paperwork. Those are your papers. So anyway, I haven't proven that yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. It sure makes sense, because like I said, Secretary of State, that is a very powerful office. And at the federal level, if you're getting John Kerry to certify, yeah, this is for real, why wouldn't they accept it? Because the common sense of it is, anytime we're traveling into another country, it is going to be considered commerce when you're traveling. But if you've got your paperwork, you're able to say, look, that's what's in commerce. You want to say, I'm on some kind of a road that's commercial? Fine. My business entity is in commerce. I'm a living man. So once again, establishing that legal name that's in their system is a business is proof that it's not you. And if it's not you and you're signing for it, you're the living man. You're the witness. You're the one who's on the outside controlling that business entity.
So the next step there would be for someone with an ANC to, that's authenticated at the, like you said, at the Secretary of State, to either, go to the border, Mexican border, Canadian border, and request passage, or, get a plane ticket to Mexico or Canada or something, and,
Well, yeah, to test it, yeah, Mexico's not that far from Southern California. I have a passport, so I could bring my passport with me and then just try to use those when I pass across instead of the passport and say, these are my papers. and see if it works. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, I have a passport too, but this is what identifies my business entity. The passport doesn't identify anything. It's not an ID. You want an identity because a living man cannot be identified. So those are merely travel papers. But see, in essence, unless you're registered, even that could be a problem, especially if you're in a foreign country. You know, are you registered? This is international, so it doesn't matter what country you're in now, there's a way to register that legal name. And they all have the same kind of setup where there's something, here they call it a Social Security number. Canada, I think they just call it an electronic ET, I'm not sure what they call it, ETN.
SIN, social insurance number there?
What's that?
I think they call it a SIN, S-I-N, social insurance number, if I recall correctly.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So each different system, like the EU, has something similar. When they connected all the countries with the EU, what they did was they used the existing numbers that those countries had and then merged them into their own database, which issued a EU number. So all of them are in the EU database as well as the local database. So what does that sound like? The United States. You know, we've got a number that's issued from the federal government, but then you use that in every state. It's good in every state. So in any event, that's where I find, and there's also connection too, where this all originates. If you want to find the truth about anything, go to its origin. Well, what's the origin of the certificate of live birth? It's in vital statistics. What's the origin of the fictitious business name statement in California? Vital records. Why is the fictitious business name statement in the same department, vital records, vital statistics, as the birth, the death, and the marriage license? Those are all connected. So what's the thing connecting all those together? That social security number. That's a common denominator. So when you're quote unquote active, your business entity is active, you register it, and that's how they track you. And then when you're dead, that death certificate's involved, and the only way they can get their hands on anything is if your heirs are not registered. You can't pass on. So in other words, when you register, it entitles you to your inheritance. You get whatever was passed on to you without the government having their hands on it. It avoids all the taxation, the probate, estate tax, death tax, whatever you want to call it. It avoids all that. It assures and why does it do that? Because when we use that name without registering it, what we're doing is we're giving up the divine right that we were born with. Why? Because we're no longer a living man. We've turned ourselves into an entity, which is where that term straw man comes from. I don't like that term because that's associated with the UCC crap. That's a trap. Any of that is a trap. All of it is. As are just about any of those sites out there. The ones, if they're asking for money, yeah, forget it. There's no way. They're all scams. Every single one of them. And they work because they work for them, not for us, because they're keeping us away from what the simple answer is. Anytime we get close to the answer of this, you'll find all kinds of opposition, like I did. Trying to register the proper way here in California is impossible. They made it that way, intentionally. And the reason being is because if everyone figured this out, the government would shrink. There's no need for any violence or anything, though. It's just going to happen. It's just going to happen as a matter of people discovering, wow, I've been breaking the law the whole time. No wonder. You're just giving discretion to the law enforcement community and judges, and they've got the discretion to do whatever they want to you. So if they like you, they can let you go. If they don't like you, oh yeah, they can wield this illusionary power, but we're doing it to ourselves. And if we're doing it to ourselves and realize it, then we can correct it. If it was something that was out of our control, then, it would be different. But this is totally within our control. And if they don't, if you register and they ignore what you're showing them and they still treat you as if you were breaking the law, now they're making themselves personally liable. And that's the final piece of the puzzle, is getting back what they unjustly took and becoming the plaintiff, in other words, through your business entity. So your business entity is filing the suit against the person who's not registered, which is usually either a contracted third party to government or the government. Those are the only people that unjustly enrich themselves. Is like in the case of a foreclosure, it would be the bank. But who's helping the bank? Who do they depend on? They depend on the court system. If you shut down the court system, what is the bank going to do? They can't do anything. So it's not about owning anything. We don't own anything. We possess it, and we can control it. So if you're already in the house and you eliminate the bank, guess what? You're in possession of that property. Now the only other thing left is to control it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, so the other 10th is controlling it. When you register that name, that gives you that control, which is why the bank has to step aside. Their contract there is no contract. All contracts are null and void because they cannot be entered into legally without you having full consent and knowledge of what you're doing. You didn't know what you were doing. Nobody does. And then when you find out, you go, wow, I did that to myself, but they helped you. So if they helped you, they can't gain from it by not telling you the whole truth. They omitted facts that are necessary for you to make a decision as to whether or not you should be operating the way you are, whether you should be going and getting a driver's license and saying that's you. That's the whole thing. That's why this is working, and why government is now like backed into a corner. But see, the government is not the enemy. And although the government employees feel threatened, it's only because they've been doing something incorrectly and thereby making themselves personally liable. That's why they're afraid. That's why cops don't pull me over. They won't pull me over, but if they see my truck sitting on the street, they'll try to steal it while I'm not looking. But see, I caught them. I've been waiting for this to happen, so we're getting close. I'm working on the answer. It's a demur, so I'm going to respond to that, and I'll let you guys know when how it transpires. But I'm in the process of preparing it. I'm probably going to file it tomorrow. That's the plan anyway. So anyway, that's pretty much it. The people that are trying to remove prior judgments, get them. I'm not sure what the terminology is. I've heard the term withdraw the complaint, that you request. See, the way I see this working is you would prepare a notice and send it to, like, if you were prosecuted, to the prosecutor. Who's the head prosecutor? Just pick one person. You only need one, and the one at the top is the one that makes the most money, that's usually the one that you want to pick. They're the ones that are ultimately responsible. So they become personally liable for any damages suffered as a result of them doing whatever it is they did. So if you serve time in jail, what's that worth? See, that's the one thing that's hard to put a price on, of the time of an innocent man being thrown in jail. Well, the determination is left up to you. You're the plaintiff. So that's $1 million a day. Okay, so I'm going to need settlement. Here's my offer to settle. I need this much money. I need any and every instance where that name is being used. I have not given you permission to use that name at all. There's no contract between my business entity and your agency. If that name appears anywhere in the public record, you're going to pay for it. I'm going to hold you personally liable. So in other words, you force him to have to go to the judge and say, hey, we need to vacate this judgment. I don't know if it's vacate or set aside, whatever. Vacate sounds good to me, because that's like the whole thing disappears. Withdraw the complaint and vacate the judgment. But I'm not sure of the verbiage of that. That would be something that you'd have to look. Probably it's in the Code of Civil Procedure, because it's all civil. None of this is criminal. It's all civil. So what we're doing is the government employee is just a third party. But that third party is a person that's not registered, so they can't defend themselves. That's why you go after them. So if they don't respond to the notice, you say, if you do not respond in writing, that constitutes an acceptance of this offer. So in other words, if they don't do what you're asking them to do, then they're going to pay. Then that's when they're going to have to get out their checkbook, because then you're going to file a complaint against them. Well, what does that sound like? That's exactly what they do when they're trying to do plea bargain. Here, if you just sign here saying you're guilty, we'll cut you a deal. So you're cutting them a deal. Here's what you're going to do, and you need to do it within this frame. Give them enough time. Within 30 days, I want any and all records to be vacated, or whatever the terminology is, and your records corrected to reflect the fact that if you do use this name, it's my registered business entity and you need my permission. Put that somewhere in your records. So if anyone does a search, they know, we better leave this guy alone. Instead of finding your rap sheet, they're going to find a thing that says, this guy is registered, leave him alone, or whatever. So if they're running that and they haven't actually caused you damage, well, that's what you want. You just, okay, cool. Next time they see you, they'll know better. If they do it again, now they're personally liable. In other words, you give them a chance. Hey, I understand people make mistakes, but at this point, it's time that you understand. You can't stop me anymore. And if you do, next time, I've got a fee schedule. It's going to cost you $1 million. So they understand. It's all about contract. And see, that presupposition clause is what they're using as being in contract. Well, what do you have to prove that you're not Douglas Joseph Herrick? Oh, I'm glad you asked me. I have it right here. This assumed name certificate. Now, I'm going to need you to get your checkbook out because you owe me some money. See, that you assumed that I was Douglas Joseph Herrick, and I've got this assumed name certificate which proves you're wrong. So you presupposed that I was under some kind of contract with your agency by virtue of the fact that I wasn't registered, but I am registered. Are you registered? I'm going to need to see some ID. Then he has to show me his ID.
I showed you mine. This identifies my business. Now I've got his name. Now I can hold him personally liable for anything. That is the way the system's supposed to work. That's the check and balance that we all think the Constitution is supposed to guarantee, but it doesn't. Yeah, that check and balance requires that we figure our end out first. Clean up your own house first before you come complaining. So that's why I say when people complain about this system, they're doing it to themselves. It's ridiculous. No wonder, they just don't get it. And it's not that they're stupid. We've just been trained. We've been trained to believe in something that's not true. And it's in our textbooks. It's in the media. All these subliminal things. They're affecting the way we think. So if you're already thinking on the level that, hey, something's wrong, and you're looking for the answer, it's going to be easier for you to see this. Because you'll see every time you're in court, the first thing they have to do is what? Establish that legal name is you. If they can't, they'll do what's called an identity hearing. And then they'll try to force that name on you. They'll try to have all this evidence that says, yeah, that's you. Look, there's fingerprints. All you need is one thing. Here's my assumed name certificate. And by the way, if you got fingerprints of the living man, me, you got no permission to have that. That's going to cost you too. So do you think they're going to leave those remnants of a record in their system if it's going to cost them? No. So you may have to squeeze them at first, but down the road, it's going to get a lot easier. Anytime they see someone's registered, it's going to just automatically wipe everything out, because the people who were involved in putting it in there in any way, shape, or form, if they're the ones being held accountable by your business entity and personally liable, they're going to ensure that it's taken care of. They care more about themselves than anyone else. So if they're the ones that are going to lose something, then they're the ones that are going to be more apt to help you. And that's why I said it's not government, it's the people in government. You get them to do the right thing, which you can now, you can force them. Now government becomes your friend. They're going to help me get back what was taken from me. It's counterintuitive in that regard, but I'm proving it right now. I'm going to get that judge to issue a judgment in my favor, or force the defendant to settle. He'll say either or. You either settle with the guy, give him his property back and pay him, or I'm issuing this judgment. He's not going to allow it in his courtroom, I guarantee you that. And if that judge issues in their favor, he's got to explain it. How can you explain, I'm showing you he's not registered, and I am? See, now that judge puts himself in a position where now my business entity can now sue him personally. There's no immunity for any government employee. That's why the Pope said that. That was like a couple of years ago. And just recently, he said contract law no longer exists. Contract law no longer exists, and corporate law no longer exists. Well, why is he saying that? He's saying it because the church was the one who created both of those. They're separating themselves. They're saying, okay, since we're the author, we're the ones that can pull the plug. So they're stepping back because they're directly linked to the creation of this whole thing. The thing with the name. That's their idea. They just work with the Masons as a way of getting it infiltrating it at another level without a direct connection to the Catholic Church. It has to be some kind of an organization that they have some control over that can infiltrate in commerce. Well, that's what those service clubs do. They infiltrate every level, and then they get together and make it look like they're giving back to the community when in fact they're just controlling everyone. So, but they're a part of it too. They're victims as well. So it's just it operates because of man's vanity, ego. You know, they think that by taking advantage of other people, that's going to propel them forward. But then you have to look at their philosophy. They think that this is a one-shot deal. They don't understand that if we don't get it, we're coming back here. So when you understand this is what brings us to that next level. We ascend above all the chaos and confusion. I no longer I watch what's going on in the world, but I know it's all fake. It's all an act. All of it. So when you realize it's all an act, and that there's people behind the scenes that are creating all these events, there should be no fear at all. The fear should go away. Now it becomes more a matter of us figuring out different ways to use this DVA. We've talked about that before, because it applies for everything that's in commerce. Well, think of everything that's in commerce. Everything. So, and by the way, I did hear somebody say that they used their passport in Europe to rent a car. I don't know how they did that, and I don't really believe it, but you know, that can be an issue when you're in a foreign country and you want to travel. How do you rent a car if you don't have a driver's license? And I don't even tell people don't have a driver's license. I'm just saying all the more reason to be registered if you do have a driver's license. It's even more important because that driver's license is the thing that can get you in trouble. So if you have that, you know, say your job needs it, I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm just saying that it changes the meaning of it. It's a business card now. So you're just exposing the illusion of their system. It's all an illusion. All that statute law doesn't apply to you. It applies to your business entity. And the cops they know this. They don't know the whole story, but they know just enough to know I don't want to bother with this person. Because there's too many people out there that are clueless. Why would they? And if the majority of people figure this out, guess what? The police aren't going to be there anyway. Because they're going to figure it out too. Who wants to be caught holding the bag? Nobody. So anyway, it all should become more and more obvious, and it's the common sense side of it. Because if you look at statute law and try to figure that out, the common sense side, a lot of it just goes in circles. And it's rhetoric. It goes nowhere. But that's because it's designed to be that way. They want you to think you need an attorney in order to navigate the law. And it's like, no, that actually is what you want to avoid. And navigating it has never been easier. Geez, I'm registered, I've got standing in court, I can maintain this name, and gosh, it looks like you can't. Sorry, you lose. How hard is that? It doesn't get much easier. You don't have to know any statute law. So, anyway. Okay, that's it. I don't have anything else to say. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, you just sent me a question. Is the name holder also an agent? No. Agency is what, if you're an agent, there's got to be some agency created. What is agency? It's a contract. So an agent has, what do they call it, a commission? Sometimes they'll say, yeah, I'm commissioned by the commissioner. He commissioned me with authority as an agent. So that's an agency. Well, what is that? That's a contract. And it usually, if it's an IRS agent, the contract says whatever you get half of it. You know, it's a percentage thing. No wonder they go after people so aggressively. You know, because they're going to be instructed. You got to make it look like what you're doing is legitimate. You can't do stuff just off the wall, you know, without me getting potentially in trouble. So do whatever you want, just don't step beyond that point. Well, it's pretty obvious a lot of them do pretty much whatever they want, but when you file this into the record and they become aware of it, whatever they're doing will stop immediately, whether it's the IRS or the CPS or any agency. So yeah, you don't want to be an agent of any kind. You're the CEO, the name holder. If you look up the word holder, that's the one who's in control of whatever it is that they're referring to. So if it's a name holder or a shareholder, you're in control of whatever that is. So number of shares. If you're a stakeholder, so you have that's a betting term. The sweepstakes. So the Congress are the stakeholders of this whole system. They're the ones who created it. They're the ones that have the most to gain and also the most to lose. They're the ones that are at risk ultimately of, like, I would love nothing more than to file a suit against someone like Dianne Feinstein in federal court and call her on the table for not telling her people, the people she so-called are her constituents, the truth about the name. Hey, you're supposed to be registering this name, and you've enriched yourself. I think when she first became a senator, she was like maybe, worth $500,000 or something. Now she's worth $300 million, and her husband's a billionaire. He's a real estate guy. So they're enriching themselves, and they're using insider trading and saying, hey, we're above the law. Why are they above the law? Because we're allowing them to do that. They're enriching themselves, but they have more privilege. There are no rights. So it's not like they have more rights than you do. They have more privilege. But when you register that name, you no longer are under that government privilege system. In India, it's like a caste system. Here, it's privilege. So you're either a high-ranking officer with a lot of privilege, or you're someone with a lot of wealth. That brings privilege too. Those are the two ways that you acquire privilege in this country. But when you register, you have your divine right back. There's no more are there any privileges. Those are all gone. You've now, prior to that, you've exchanged your divine right for government privilege. And of course, you can only have one master. So now government's your master. And if you try to ride both sides, it's like God's not going to allow you to ride that fence. It's all in. You got to be all in. So that, when you register that name, now you know that's not me. So anything you've done in the past, it's all forgiven. Now he can hear you. So that's the spiritual side of it anyway. Okay, what other thing here? Oh, there's someone new. I don't know. Someone just messaged, imagine, he can't get in. So do they limit? I guess they limit the number of people we can add on one call. Must be. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not the moderator, and I tried to add them, and I couldn't add them. I actually had two people that wanted to be on this call that I think Richard needs to do it.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, it's anyone I think can add somebody, but they have to be in their phone book. They have to be one of the contacts. So whoever is in contact with that person, if you click on the plus thing and add a caller, anyone can add anyone, I think.
I think
Yeah,
once you add somebody to this chat, then they have to click the little phone icon in order to actually get in on the call.
Yeah, and what'll happen is the bandwidth gets a little bit tweaked, and sometimes that's probably what's going to limit the number of calls we can make, or caller.
Yeah, he got the green join button, he says, but when I hit it, the call dropped. That's the same thing happened to the other guy. Okay, I guess we can only have this little bit of a group.
Yeah, it's limited bandwidth. You know, they want you to pay in order to get the more bandwidth. There's other things. Oh, there's someone in there. Looks like someone is added.
I am, thank you.
Okay, cool. So I don't know, Rich, you did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate it.
All right. Does anyone else have a question?
I recorded the call, Doug, so if you need a copy of it or whatever, I can send you one, or anybody else.
Yeah, whoever just joined in, you might want to, send it to him.
Sure.
Get his contact info.
I will.
I'd love to have that. But Doug, actually, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I did the assumed name in Minnesota just recently.
Right.
All right. And I have here the certificate of assumed name.
Right.
The second page that comes with it, without the certification by the Minnesota Secretary of State, that costs like an extra $15 or so.
Yeah, that's the certificate of existence and registration. Yeah.
Okay, because I have the certificate of existence, but then also I have, that costs the extra $15, where you have this, I guess it's a stamp that's inside of a square block that says State of Minnesota, I hereby certify that this is a true and complete copy of the document. It's filed for record in this office dated 9/3/15 for this one, and it has the stamped signature of the Secretary of State, and then by, I guess, his assistant. So is that, in fact, the specific document we need when we're utilizing this and to show that this is our business?
Well, I think if there's some question as to whether or not it is, that would certainly help. But if that were necessary, they would be asking for it when you open a bank account. And they don't. They just ask for the... They don't even ask for the certificate of existence. The assumed name certificate, which is 2 pages, the second page is just at the top, has the seal, and that is all I provided to the person who opened the business bank account. Now, if you're in court and someone challenges it, now who's going to challenge that? A prosecutor's not going to challenge it, and another attorney's not going to challenge it. They won't even know what it is. But at the same time, I'm not saying that that's not a bad thing. You're saying it's got the gold. Does it have a gold seal on it?
No. What came through was as I said, it's a square with the language I just read.
Yeah, but I mean, did they email it to you, or did they send it to you in the mail, or?
It was emailed.
Okay, so yeah, the only thing I'll say there is that the certificate is already certified.
And let's tell you why, because I've done a lot of research on this recently, and there is amazing power in the words "the Great Seal of."
Yeah, absolutely. It's on the assumed name certificate. That seal is on the assumed name certificate.
In fact, it is. And what I wanted to share with you, I've done some research that somebody brought to my attention from Rob Ryder. He put a video out on the 3rd of this month about the notary public and the civil law notary. Have you heard of that?
I know exactly what a notary is, but Rob Ryder, he doesn't agree with what I'm doing.
But let's not get into that debate. All I'm talking about is the notary public and the civil law notary. Have you heard of these two?
Yeah, they're both traps. Yep.
Well, actually, something very important about the civil law notary, because I've been digging into it pretty hard the last few days.
What do you need a notary for?
Just hear me out, all right? The notary public is, from what I can tell, a one who can authenticate signatures based upon the municipal corporation. The civil law notary is an international notary, and international is private. So what I'm
that's not true. But it's all public. Commerce is all public. So in essence, I'll repeat what I said. Those are both traps. You don't need a notary. It's not about identifying you. It's about identifying your business entity.
I concur.
So what do you need a notary for? A business entity can't sign anything. Can it? Only a living man can. So you're signing on behalf of your business entity. So a notary is going to want to identify whoever the signor is. Who's the signer? Well, that's you. You don't have an identity. You cannot be identified. It's impossible. That's a trap. Rob Ryder is taking people down the wrong path, but that's okay. I don't care. I just tell people anything with a notary is a trap, period. Doesn't matter what kind, just the term notary. That's a trap. That's a commercial trap. That's why a lot of these states are now going to their version of the DBA is requiring a notary. That makes it very clear that's a trap. That's an obvious trap, though. And I was never a notary, but I was in real estate, and we used notaries all the time. So they can actually sign without looking at an ID if they personally know you. They can personally vouch. Well, that's scary. So you can personally vouch that I'm a business entity. So anyone who is pushing that kind of information is someone that I would run away from. I wouldn't listen. See, Rob Ryder, when you look at how he registered, it does nothing. And he dropped that whole thing anyway. I know a lot of people who got the message about, registering that name through him, but they're not having the success. They said, yeah, we did it just like him, only, we're not having that kind of success. Why? Because he's not doing anything. When you put the form that he filled out, I want to say it was Ohio. It was a different state. There is not one assumed name or fictitious business name certificate that I could find in any state other than Minnesota that is not a trap. Minnesota, they don't ask any questions. What's your business name? What's your business address? What's the name holder? What's the name holder's address? What's your phone number and your email? Sign here. Done. Look at all the other forms. You got to have a notary. You got to check a box. What's the nature of your business? It's none of their business. All you're wanting to do is register the name. Why do you have to answer all those questions? Because those questions are what trap you. So, anyway, I know you may be well-meaning, but anything regarding a notary, I would just avoid like the plague. That's all I have to say about it.
Okay. And to stay consistent with the theme of your model.
It's not a model. It's the law.
The model derived from the law. I just use model so we could quantify in terms of...
But that's an incorrect term. It's not a model. It's a certificate of assumed name that allows you to operate in business, in commercial activity, business transactions, legally. That's not a model. When you
Okay,
talk about a
phrase.
business model, has nothing to do with law.
All right, in terms of, let me rephrase, in terms of what you've discovered,
Okay.
all right? The overall idea is to have the clear evidence that you, the man, are at arm's length.
No, arm's length is not the right term. You, the man, are a living man. A living man cannot operate in a commercial world. So that's more than an arm's length. Arm's length is nothing. That means nothing. So that's another term that's a trap. Yeah, arm's length transaction. Nope, that's not what it is. That's not enough of a separation. You have to make a clear cut. You can't have any of that. So what it is if you operate any other way, you're operating illegally. So all they have to do is wait for you to commit the act. You think you're doing everything legally? So when you do register that name, you don't need permits, you don't need licenses. Those just cause more problems. A license is a license to break the law.
You know, what's interesting about what you're saying is, I was talking to my dad on Monday, and he was in the corporate world for many years, and he was in top-level management, but he never sat on the board of trustees. So I said to him, so when the board of trustees passes their policy or makes a resolution for a new policy, how does that get communicated to the employees? And he said through HR.
Well, no, you're talking about board of directors.
Right, the board of trustees, board of directors.
No, board of trustees is not a board of directors. Sorry, but that's okay.
Okay, well, actually, that's very interesting. Forgive me, because I thought they were one and the same.
Nope.
All right.
A trustee is the one who holds property. The directors don't hold any property unless they're what? Stakeholders or shareholders, and if that's the case, it's a publicly traded company. A trustee, if you're a trustee, okay, then you're a trustee of what? A trust. So if your dad worked for a trust, yeah, there'd be a board of trustees. If not, it's a board of directors.
So the board of directors could work for a company that has issued private stock to its stakeholders, but not trading on the public indexes.
Well, yeah, but that's operating within the corporate structure. That's all corporate law. So that's what dictates that. That has absolutely nothing to do with a DBA.
Well, the reason I brought that up is because that's the contrast. Because here, I'm in Florida. Something we have in Florida, Doug, is we have on every day on TV, 24 hours a day, we get this thing called the Florida Channel, where they're always broadcasting either the in session of the Supreme Court, the legislature, events where the governor speaks. And now that I realize what they're doing, I see the legislatures as the board of directors or board of trustees, the governor as being the CEO, and the police agencies as being the HR department now. And based upon the model of it being in contrast from the assumed name as being an individual opposed to an organization, that now I see how they're imposing the corporate policy of the municipal corporation known as the state of on everybody.
And what is that?
Statute. Colorado law.
No, it's not. The fact that the law has nothing to do with it. If you're claiming that name is yours, you're busted before you even do anything. That's why they can arrest you for nothing at all, and then when you resist, that will be the charge. So, in other words, there are no rights. The statutes don't mean anything. They're all fiction. But when you become a part of that fiction, you subject yourself to not only those statutes, but whatever they want to do. If they go beyond, what is considered reasonable, you might get some some blowback. That's when the people get together and start to protest and stuff. But see, that's the other side. I don't do any of that. This is an individual choice. Has nothing to do with what you're talking about. Absolutely nothing. It's all it's more about knowing who you are and being able to prove who you are not. That's what it is.
And that goes consistent with what KW's talking about with not being associated with the vessel name on the birth certificate as the organization, but to have the evidence to prove that the name is no longer part of the organization, but now has a holder of it that is an individual.
It never was part of any organization. Never was. It was created for you to use, and you have to register it. So you're registering the name as a business entity. You want to call it an organization, that's a little bit of a stretch because it's you that controls it. So how is that an organization?
Well, whenever you go to court and they say John Doe, and you say that's me, and obviously if they have the any reason to believe that they have a power to administrate it, well, that involves you and the other administrating party.
You have to admit to being that person.
And that creates the organization. That is the evidence of the organization right there.
When you admit that, but I'm talking about when you register the name.
Right, I concur.
It's not even close to what you're comparing it to, though. It's the exact opposite.
Right, I'm talking about prior to.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of what we think it is. And so in turn, it turns the tables too. Now they have to prove that they didn't unjustly enrich themselves. I don't have to prove that I was damaged. They have to prove that they didn't gain by what they did to me. Or anyone else, for that matter. So the burden of proof's on them. Makes it a lot easier.
And what's really interesting about that is here in the county where I live, I look at the dockets that are online at the county clerk's office, and Doug, every judge, when you look up the judge, listed with the case, every one of those judges has something on there called a participant ID. And when you look up what the definition of a participant is, it's one who is a participant of an employee benefit retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm illustrating this or sharing this is because when we look at this model prior to the assumed name registration and taking control of it and having the evidence to prove with the Great Seal that it is in fact a individual and no longer a organization, that they are participating with the organization and filling up their retirement accounts based upon our ignorance.
Well, yeah. I mean, they know. The judges know that name is a part of it. What they probably are not taught is the part that I'm using now, which is when they refer to standing, in other words, what they talk about and what they think of standing, they think of, do you have a legitimate reason to sue this person? And that's not what standing is. Standing is, do you have the ability?
Status.
Do you have the ability to sue and or defend yourself? And that's based on being in good standing with the state. So if you're a corporation and you don't pay your taxes, they suspend your license. When your license is suspended, what's one of the penalties? What's one of the effects of it? You cannot defend yourself in court and you cannot sue anybody. Guess what? That's the same as when you don't register that name. You're using that name, you're not in good standing, but when you register the name properly, you realize, oh, that's not me anyway. It's never been me. It's always been an entity. I was just incorrectly, I was misusing that name. That's what it boils down to. You misuse the name, you know, you're playing the game, but you're misusing the name, so you're getting tools. They're using it against you. They'll use that name against you.
That's so interesting you say that, because here in Florida, when it comes to child support cases, the very first thing they do when there's a delinquency in the child support payment is suspend the driver's license.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so they're going to suspend what they consider to be privileges, and in order to squeeze you to get you to do what they want you to do.
And then therefore they could claim you don't have standing to make a defense.
Mm-hmm. Well, they want you to argue. That's why cops are taught to lie. They want you to argue with the cop. Oh, that cop's a liar. I'm going to sue you. Oh, yeah, go right ahead. See, and then you argue, you create a controversy. Now you've just given that judge a job. Oh, good, you know, but the only thing that you'll see that judge has to do in every case where there's a hearing of any kind, they have to identify the defendant. And how do they do that? They need you to say you're the defendant. So when you file something into the record that says, no, that defendant is my registered business entity, you just threw that whole case into a tailspin. It stops everything. It stops a CPS case, it stops a criminal case, it stops a civil case, any case.
And would you suggest to just do a filing, attach that to a notice?
Yeah, that's exactly what you do. You prepare a notice and you state the fact that that name is your registered business entity and it's been assigned this tax ID number. If that name is being used by anyone or anything else without your express permission, that there are penalties. So you need a public accounting, a public record of any cases where that name appears in the public record. Because if it does appear without your permission, and what's your permission? A contract. So if there's no contract and they're using that name, that's damage. You got to pay now. That's why when I took the numbered plate off my car, they stopped pulling me over. They were afraid that I might be registered. I created an illusion that I was registered, even though I wasn't registered because I didn't even know how to do it yet. But they thought I might be because I don't have a numbered plate. They couldn't identify the vehicle. And I tried to get pulled over. I would drive in the carpool lane, I'd speed, I'd run stop signs right in front of cops, and they'll come behind me. As soon as they see that plate, they turn left or right or pull a U-turn. But I got them to admit why they wouldn't do it. And that's why I knew that registering that name is important. That's it.
What did they say exactly, Doug?
They said, they told me that they were told to be able to identify a vehicle first before you pull it over. Somehow identify it. So that could mean, you know, if it's a car that's just got a paper plate that looks like it just got bought, you know, from a dealer or whatever, it should have that little red thing in the front. Okay, or if it's got a numbered plate, it should have the tags on there showing that it's current.
What you're saying is there are triggers which identify.
Well, that identify that.
Right.
You can't identify a living man. That's a trick. So you cannot, an entity can be identified. That's what the ANC does. It identifies that business entity. You cannot be identified, period. Impossible. No wonder a judge told me you're not allowed in my courtroom. Okay, don't drag me in here. You drag me in here, I'm a living man, that's your problem. Tell them not to do it. So the judge is exposing him or herself to the whole world when a living man exposes them on the bench, because they're not registered.
And that's consistent with what KW did, if you remember this, Daniel, where he went to court.
Who's KW? I don't know who KW is.
He's a friend of Daniel's and I that has had some great success. And one of the successes he shared with us over the course of time was when he was in court, that he went in there and he said, hang on a minute, Judge, before we go any further, I'm going to need the names, nationalities, and citizenships of all the participants in this proceeding. And his the way he tells the story, this is his, I'm pretty close to his description here, is that the head started whipping around and it got real quiet in there. And about 30 seconds later, the judge looked at him and said, what do you want me to do about me not having jurisdiction? And that was a trick question, Doug.
What was his answer?
You remember what it was, Daniel?
Which one is Daniel?
0?
Oh, okay. He might be muted.
It might be. Well, I got to go back and review, but obviously you wouldn't want the judge to do anything, because at that moment you would express your will to the judge and then he would take it and that would give him jurisdiction. And simply something that I would say, let the record show the court does not have jurisdiction, case dismissed.
Well, how do you think the court gains jurisdiction? And what kind of jurisdiction are you talking about?
Well, first of all, one question at a time. Consent. They gain it by consent.
And what kind of consent? What are you talking about?
By one walking in saying, I'm John Doe.
There it is. So when they have to gain what kind of jurisdiction though?
Personam.
It's personal jurisdiction. So that personal jurisdiction needs you to say that. So
right, yes, no question.
And what they're going to do is they're going to, if a case is in progress, they're going to just make the assumption, oh, well, you've been here before, that's you.
Yeah,
just your appearance.
Assumptions, yes.
Just your appearance. So you have to prove now that's not you. That's where the assumed name certificate comes in.
And that wonderful seal.
If he had presented that assumed name certificate and said, Your Honor, you never established jurisdiction, personal jurisdiction, this is my registered business entity. Are you registered? Because if you're not registered, I'm going to need to see some ID. I need to know what business I'm being asked to do business with. Oh, wait a minute, you're not registered? So now, all of a sudden, you've just undressed that judge. That judge is not complying with the statute that you are. Who are you? See, the judge, the term honorable, whatever, that's all just make-believe. That's how they pat each other on the back. Oh, how are you, Your Honor? You know, the attorney, and everyone refers to him. I don't refer to him. I refer to him as Mr. or I call them by their name. Mm-hmm. Jane Godfrey. And they address the judge accordingly. I said, I am. She's a living woman. She is registered, right? Now, do you think that a judge is going to want someone like me in that court? Hell no. Because they're going to run. Many judges have run out of the courtroom. We're in recess, and they run out. It's like, wait a minute, there's some unfinished business here. So it's just exposed the whole system. It's all a fraud. It might as well be, held in Disneyland. There's nothing going on of any consequence when I'm involved.
Hey, so that notice you're talking about, do you file that directly into the docket of a case, or do you send that notice directly to the judge, or the opposing counsel, or all the above?
All the above, yeah. You let them all know. You let them all know because everyone that's a party to it is got to be notified, because then if they do anything beyond that, then they can't say, hey, I didn't know. Well, you sure do. I sent it to you. Here, I got proof right here. You file it into the court, and if you are in the court, You're only there to appear on behalf of your registered business entity to make sure that the judge and all these other people are aware.
Notice.
Yeah, they've been noticed that, hey, I'm registered. Be on the on the alert. I'm registered.
And upon that registration, I have standing.
Yeah. You can maintain that name in a court, so you can defend it, and also
Now I know why.
You can also sue.
You know what? Now I know why they are. That right there tells me why they're trying to push so hard to push attorneys on people, because when none of the names are registered, they get their functionary, their court officer, to come in and administrate that because it's not registered. Now I know why.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and so when you register, an attorney can't represent you. See, attorneys can only represent things, entities. You can present yourself, but someone else cannot represent a living man.
Right, because the man is present.
The man can present himself, but then that doesn't work in their world. See, they need to have an entity in that courtroom. A living man can't operate in that world of commerce. Period.
You know what it's called? You know what? There's a word for what they do in that courtroom. It's called necromancy.
I've heard of that term, yeah, because everyone is assumed to be dead, and that's why they say, okay, all rise. When they come in, it's like, okay, wake up now, because we're going to need you to testify or whatever it is that you're there for.
To animate the death.
Yeah. It brings the
Conjure.
Animation to life, but it's still fake. It's still just animated. It's an act. It's all an act. They're just actors on a stage.
You know, the Masons call it the craft. And now when we say necromancy, now I know what they're doing in that courtroom. They're doing witchcraft.
Yeah.
Which craft do you choose? Do you choose the craft of life, or do you choose the craft of death? That's really
that's part of the spell that people are under. So this essentially breaks that spell and exposes them, and that's how you stay out of the courtroom. You tell them in writing, this is the way it is. If you give them an out, though. You always want to give them an out, so it doesn't drag on. You want to give them an opportunity to give them an offer to settle. Hey, we can settle this thing, and that's what I did. I have been wanting to get pulled over and my truck towed so that I could test this. Well, nobody would pull me over, and I'd park it in different places. It would never get towed. Well, it finally got towed. They took the bait right out in front. I'm at a friend's house up in Northern California. So now, what I first did, I tried to contact the tow owner. I went outside when they were doing it. There were 3 cops out there. I said, hey, fellas, what's going on? You know whose truck this is? I go, yeah, it belongs to my business entity. You see, it says private property there. It's not public property. Yeah, but it's on a public road. And I said, really? I said, that's funny, because that road is actually a private road, too. The property line goes to the middle of the street, but you probably don't know that. That's okay. I actually have been waiting for 5 years for this. You guys took the bait. Oh, thank you. So they're all like scratching their heads, like, why is this guy happy? So I said, hey, I got some paperwork I need to show you. And they're like, you can't go back in the house. I said, really? I go, I just told you I'm going to get paperwork to identify my business entity. I'll be right back. Don't go in the house. I said, watch me. And I walked right in the house, came out with 2 pieces of paper, the assumed name certificate, which I used 2-sided, and I laminated it, and then the other one is the certificate of existence and registration on one side. The other side is the status showing good standing.
And that's the 8.5 by 11?
Yeah, just that letter size. Yeah, I just went down and had them laminated. So So I came out with my hands up, holding those. I go, hey guys, they're hiding behind their police cars with their guns drawn. They're a bunch of pussies. So I said, hey guys, look, it's paper. You might get a paper cut, but I think you can put your guns away. And so they came and they looked at it. Oh, this is Minnesota. This doesn't mean anything here. I go, that's exactly what I thought you'd say. I said, and I'm glad you think that. But, you know, what you'll find is that it's just like a certificate of live birth. You can use it in any state. It's issued by the Secretary of State. Just like that certificate of live birth. You telling me you can't take that certificate of live birth and go get a driver's license anywhere? Of course you can. So, yeah, the whole thing here is that they're thinking I'm going to sue them. And, oh, no. See, I don't have a contract with them, and I don't have a contract with the tow company. So I'm going to establish one by writing a letter to the tow owner who's in possession of the truck. I found out that, you know, most of these third parties have a contract of some kind. Well, they just have a tow list. It's a rotating list. They just call tow trucks. Nothing is mandatory. It's all voluntary. There's no requirement to perform.
So I got a question based upon that model, because I was Daniel shared the other call with me where you guys were talking recently, and you mentioned this whole story. So I'm kind of looking at the assumed name once you have evidence of the ownership of it.
You don't own it.
Okay.
You're the name holder.
Okay, well, once you have evidence that you're the name holder, and
Right.
they take that name and they put it into their public records, I'm thinking that could be a suit for slander and libel.
Well, you don't have to use those terms. What it is, because that's in their commercial world. Okay? What they're doing is they're using that name without an express contract from you. That's where they're breaking the law. See, they're using it without your permission. And if they've got fingerprints, they need permission for that too. Why? Because they're saying that they're connected to that name.
So what we're just talking about simply is theft.
They're misusing the name.
That's what I'm saying. Once you have that certificate of assumed name,
the theft would be if they stole property.
Well, the name is property.
Yeah, but you're not the owner. You're just the name holder. You control it. You control it. So the closest it would be intellectual property. But it's not even that. It's simply contract. They lack the contract. So if they lack a contract, then there has to be, and they have property of yours, like a truck, you either have to give it to them, or if they mistakenly take it, you give them an offer to give it back. Hey, you made a mistake. I know you have it. I know you're in possession of it. But here, I got proof. It's mine. It belongs to my registered business entity. You didn't know better. I'm going to give you a chance to give it back. If you don't give it back from the date it was taken, you got 10 days. If I don't get it back in the same condition it was in, it's now going to cost you $1,500 a day from the day it was rented by you. So in other words, now he's accepting the offer by merely not answering. Because I say that. If there's no response, that constitutes an acceptance. So you're accepting the fact you're going to pay $1,500 a day until you return it. But of course, he's thinking that's predicated on me being right and me following through and actually filing a suit. And he thinks I'm going to file a suit against his corporation. And I'm not. I filed the suit against his person, him, Richard Shipp. So that's the difference here. They're trying to say, oh, he's behind the corporate veil. You need to adjoin the corporation and the city of Walnut Creek because he was following the orders. His employee was following the order of a public official. Well, wait a minute. The public official doesn't have a contract even with you. He was not compelled to have to do that at all. And even if he was, he still that he couldn't identify that vehicle, so he shouldn't have towed it. See, they're not supposed to tow vehicles that they can't identify, and they did. They just thought they could get away with it. They didn't know anything about me. In fact, they didn't count on me walking out. The street out in front here at night is like empty. It's a lot of people that work downtown. They park here. So they probably thought I was just parked here and walk downtown. And they can just take it kind of discreetly, nobody's looking, and I come walking out of the house. Hey, fellas. So I caught him. The first thing I said is, well, it looks like you guys took the bait. Thanks, I've been trying 5 years. They could not figure that out. They left scratching their head. So, anyway, yeah, it's probably getting close to a time where I need to go. So, I got some other stuff I got to get taken care of.
Thank you very much, Doug. Appreciate it.
You bet, you bet. And I don't know, is there any other quick questions that anyone has?
Yeah, well, I don't know how quick it is, but I'll ask you this. As far as your experience with giving notice of the assumed name in a court case in the past, how long did it take once they got notice before they just backed off?
Well, in the case, there's a CPS case, which, of course, was connected to a family law case, a couple of days. That's all it took. CPS closed their case, and that case, that was back in June, and that case is dead in the water. Nothing is happening.
Oh, was that prior to a court order being issued in it or after?
There was an application for an order that had been granted, so they gave a temporary order basically until June 3rd. And on June 3rd, there was a hearing that he did not attend. That's the day we met. So that hearing was when they were supposed to grant, the judge was supposed to grant the formal court order, which would have given the mother full medical discretion, making authority. And that was never issued. So he didn't appear. The judge chewed out his attorney for him not being there because, see, she couldn't issue the formal court order. So she said, get your client to come in. Where the hell is he? And so, meanwhile, the reason he didn't go to court that day was, I think that was just God's way of intervening and saying, you don't need to go there. We met, he registered the next day. I mean, we literally had dinner that night, and he told me, yeah, I was supposed to have a hearing today, and I didn't go. I just blew it off. I said, that was a good thing. I'm glad you did, because we're going to get you registered, and that's just going to stop that whole thing. And at that point, I didn't even know anything about the application for order or the fact that they were trying to get a court order for that hearing. I found that out after the fact. There's more to it, but it stopped it cold.
Okay.
I was just going to say, he sent it out, I want to say it was like probably the 6th of June, 6th or 7th, 3 or 4 days later. And they got it within a day or two. And this is San Diego. So what they did, about 3 weeks later, all of a sudden, they started calling him, CPS, out of the blue, and leaving messages. Hey, we need to talk to you. And I told him, don't engage them. He goes, yeah, they're being really nice and stuff. Normally they're yelling and screaming and calling, saying that they're going to do this or that. They're saying, you do want to see your son, don't you? I said, yeah, that's a trap. They're going to try and send you something, too. You wait. So they did. And they were sending it to Mr. Chad Arnold in all caps. So you know what I told him to do? I said, go down to the... say, you need to have this. And he filled out a form that said any mail that's coming to Mr. Chad Arnold or Chad Arnold it has to be addressed this way. And so he showed it the DBA. He said it's got to show as the DBA because if it's the DBA, he knows it's people that he's doing business with. In other words, nothing comes there just Cat Arnold anymore. It all goes back.
Well, what's your thoughts on utilizing this model for a post-court order in between the time that the order's been issued and a foreclosure scheduled and a real estate foreclosure?
Well, if you you mean a foreclosure where it's currently active?
It's currently active. There's been a court order issued, and the sale date's been scheduled, but the sale's not taken place yet.
Yeah, you file. First of all, you want to register and then file it into the record with the clerk, and then you take those copies and you give notice to the court. You give notice to that judge. There's usually a mail slot that they will put things that are just for the judge. You put that into their mail slot, the one that's filed. You get like four copies of it and go down there and get them to stamp each copy. So
yep. I'm with
originals. And you got originals of that, and then you send them to the parties, so they can't say they didn't know. And it will stop the sale. It has to. They can't go through with it.
Because otherwise they're trespassing, aren't they?
Well, what did they convict? What did they get a judgment against? Your registered business entity. So they can come take your registered business entity. They can't take the property though. The judgment is against the business entity. Well, have they established personal jurisdiction if it's a business entity? You see the trick? They can't. There is no personal jurisdiction. Now it's a different type of jurisdiction. They can't establish personal jurisdiction when it's a registered business entity.
So what you're suggesting is that if they did claim they had it established in the past, that would take it directly away from them without a contract in place.
Well, it would end because that would all be based on what? Presumption. And you've got the assumed name certificate. They were assuming that name was you, and now you've got proof. No, that name wasn't me. So any contracts prior to that would include the deed of trust. That contract is void. Who signed it? If it's the way most people sign, it's the business entity that signed it. Well, guess what? That's impossible. There was no contract because you entered into that without being told everything. So the contract is void. And the main reason is too because now you can prove the whole thing is fake. It's all fiction.
Through the Great Seal.
It's fiction. That's all it is. So and the form of restitution, they teach just enough in law school to know that it exists, but there's no statutes that even use that term. It's called the third form of restitution. It's the restatement of the third form of restitution called unjust enrichment. And that's what I'm discovering right now is how we get back what they took. Whether it's a third party contractor or the government employee.
You're talking about claim and recoupment, right?
I'm talking about personal liability and being able to hold them accountable and have a tool to force the court to help you get it back. So now I'm going to use government to get back what they took from me. It's ironic, but that's what I'm doing. And they have no choice. Their hands are tied. It's the opposite of what they do in a plea bargain. Here, you got two choices, this one or this one. So I give them the same kind of thing. You got two choices. You either give me my property back and pay this, or just give me my property back. That was the first offer. I just want my business property back, and then we're good. But if you don't, it's going to be $1,500 a day. Well, I knew full well he was going to ignore it. But what I just did was I established a tacit agreement. It doesn't even have to be in writing, but I have a letter that says, hey, Judge, I tried to explain to this guy, you made a mistake. And I told him, all you got to do is bring the business property back. He has no obligation, in other words, to keep that property. I'm telling him right now. You made a mistake, bring it back. But if you don't, that's okay. You're renting that for $1,500 a day until you return it. Because he won't sell it. He won't sell it. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I got to go too.
Thanks so much, Doug.
Thank you,
All
Doug.
right, you bet.